Hello, we're having a whistle-stop tour of Cubase zone by zone. At the moment we're just having a look at the left-hand inspector panel over here. We can turn this thing on or off from this little button up in the top window. I almost always have it on. And it gives you information about the selected track. So each time I change it, the information changes. And the most important stuff is this stuff up at the top. You're going to want to know how to handle inputs and outputs from various tracks. Where is the data coming from? Where is it going to? And you see a lot of that from this little box up here. So I currently have a guitar track selected, and you can see that the input is coming from this guitars input. I'm not dealing with audio in this specific video, but just to quickly show you, I have two different types of bus input named in this config, and they're vocal and guitars. And this is the guitars input here. So that's a stereo input to this audio track. If I select a different track, so now I've selected a VST instrument, the information changes slightly. Now it's representing a VST instrument. In other words, where is the data coming from now? Well, it's coming from my keyboard. If I select, press a key on the keyboard, Impulse is the name of the Novation Impulse keyboard that I have. So you're going to want to learn all of this, all of these settings up here. Again, because this is a whistle-stop tour, I'm not diving into any of the specific information, but this panel at the top of the inspector pane is important, and we do need to learn what all of this stuff is, and in different videos we'll cover different pieces of this functionality. Almost nothing else on this page need worry you for now. We'll get to many of these in later tutorials when we're dealing with some of the more advanced stuff, but in terms of getting you up and running with a basic setup, you can almost completely ignore almost everything else on this panel. Let's have a look at visibility. Now this you do want to know about. This is what tracks do you want to see, both here and in the mixer. And for each track that we disable, see Pad Shop 01 is currently here. If I turn it off, it disappears, and it also disappears from the mixer. Turn it on, comes back, and comes back. I actually keep everything visible all the time. I used to make things invisible, and then I'd forget that I'd made them invisible and got confused about where stuff was, why was I hearing stuff that I couldn't see. It's more trouble than it's worth to me, and I actually keep everything visible all the time now. One piece of functionality that I do employ, however, is zones. So now this is where this panel gets confusing, because you've got buttons at the top and bottom that have multiple tabs on each one. So here we're on the visibility page, which is your top tab, and this was the track tab at the bottom that allowed you to disable or enable individual tracks' visibilities. If we go over to the zones tab, we now get 3 zones in the mixer that we can move stuff over to. And so the way I have it set up is that I have my inputs in the left hand zone. So there's vocal and guitars, those are my 2 inputs. So I always see them. If I ever hit a note on a guitar or the bass or talk through the microphone, the reason why you can't see this microphone at the moment is routing complexities between having Cubase running and OBS at the same time. Don't worry about that. On the right hand side, I've got my outputs. So I have my master bus and my stereo out, and you can see that these have been configured. There's my stereo out. The master bus is all the way up here. It doesn't matter. As soon as I put it in the right hand zone, then it jumps over here. If I made that central again, it would jump back to its natural place in the listing. So the order that these tracks appear here is always the same as the order that they appear down here. But as soon as I move it to the right hand zone, it jumps over into that zone, and it's the left hand most of the panels in the right hand zone, if that makes sense. Once you've dealt with your left hand zone and your right hand zone, everything else is in the middle zone. And if I had more tracks, let's see if I add some audio tracks. Then now we've got a scroll bar, and you can see the left hand and right hand panes are always visible at all times, but the stuff in the middle is what scrolls. Okay, so that's really handy to have your inputs and your outputs always visible, and the stuff in the middle, like I say, scrolls. One other piece of functionality that we can access from up here is this little equal sign. It's super easy to miss. If you click that, then that allows you to sync the view in your project and your mix console. The mix console isn't this, it's this. Basically just a bigger version of the same thing. So if you want to sync what you see in this console in terms of visibility with the options that you've picked over here, then you can choose that sync project and mix console. I don't worry about this because I have everything visible all the time. But if you want to get into the visibility thing and start tweaking and twiddling, just bear in mind that you've got options over here that will enable you to have different views depending on whether or not you're looking at the main track view or the mix console. This was a very quick intro because I deliberately don't want to start diving into every one of these tabs. There's an awful lot of information in here that we could get carried away with, and you don't need any of it to write good music. You could literally leave all of those tabs alone for the whole time you ever use Cubase and you wouldn't suffer too much. But there is good stuff in there and we'll get there eventually, just not now. So in terms of setup for your default template, don't get too hung up on this panel. Make sure you've got your visibility options sorted. The left and right panes are really useful. So this visibility tab with the zones tab at the bottom is great. And we'll worry about the nitty gritty of all of this stuff in another video at another time. Next time we'll sort our project colors out and make sure everything looks nice and pretty. And hopefully I'll see you then. Thanks very much for watching.